Life has a way of testing people in the most unexpected ways. For Daniel, it all seemed to collapse at once. He had always dreamed of building a comfortable life, but somewhere along the way, his dreams were buried beneath bills, failures, and an endless stream of disappointments. The job he once loved became a daily battle for survival. The relationships he valued grew distant. Nights were sleepless, and mornings felt heavier than the last. Every mirror he looked into reflected not only his tired face but also the doubts and fears he carried inside. Daniel often wondered if life was punishing him for dreaming too big. His thoughts grew darker, and he convinced himself that no matter what he did, nothing would change. He replayed every mistake like a broken record, the wrong decisions, the missed chances, the people who walked away. Negativity wrapped itself around him like a thick fog, making it nearly impossible to see beyond the moment. And the worst part, he had accepted that this was his reality. To him, happiness was something other people got to experience. Success belonged to those born lucky. He was just meant to endure. One rainy evening, after another exhausting day, Daniel found himself wandering through a bookstore to escape the storm outside. He had no plan, no interest in buying anything, he simply needed shelter. But as he passed by a shelf, a book slipped and fell at his feet. Startled, he picked it up. The cover read, "The Power of Positive Thinking." He almost laughed. Positive thinking, it sounded like a cruel joke. How could thinking differently change the hard truth of his life? Yet something made him open the first page. Inside, he found words that pierced through the fog. Change your thoughts and you change your world. For the first time in months, Daniel felt a spark, small, fragile, but undeniable. Could it be that his mind, not just his circumstances, was holding him hostage? He carried the book home, half curious, half skeptical. That night, instead of drowning in self-pity, he read stories of people who had faced incredible struggles but transformed their lives simply by changing the way they thought. He still doubted, but a voice inside whispered, "What if it's true?" The next morning, Daniel decided to experiment. He stood in front of the mirror and, though it felt ridiculous, he whispered, "Today will be better." He didn't believe it, but he said it anyway. On the way to work, instead of focusing on traffic and noise, he noticed the sunlight breaking through clouds. At the office, when a colleague criticized his work, he forced himself to respond calmly instead of reacting in anger. These were tiny shifts, almost invisible, but he felt something stirring inside, a sense of control he hadn't felt in years. Days turned into weeks, and though his life hadn't transformed overnight, Daniel noticed subtle changes. He started keeping a small notebook, writing down 3 things he was grateful for each day. At first, it was hard. What could he possibly be thankful for? But as he kept writing, the list grew: a stranger's smile, the warmth of coffee, the fact that he still had a chance to try again. Slowly, he began to realize that his old belief, that life was only suffering, wasn't the whole truth. One afternoon, he met a mentor at work who noticed his efforts to stay calm and positive. "I can see you're changing," the mentor said. "Keep going. The way you think shapes everything around you." That simple encouragement lit a fire within Daniel. He realized positive thinking wasn't about denying reality, it was about choosing how to respond to it. For the first time in years, Daniel no longer felt like life was happening to him. Instead, he felt like he was starting to shape life itself. The journey had only begun, and he still had a long way to go, but the spark was alive. And deep inside, Daniel believed that if he kept nurturing it, that tiny spark could light up his entire world. Daniel's mornings began to look different. Instead of rushing out of bed in frustration or dragging himself into another day of routine, he carved out a few minutes for silence. He would sit by his small window, close his eyes, and breathe deeply. At first, his mind would race with worries, about work, about money, about the things he still hadn't fixed, but gradually, with practice, he began to notice the calm that followed those breaths. He started repeating affirmations quietly: "I am capable. I am growing. My life is moving in the right direction." Though awkward at first, the words slowly sank into his mind like drops of water carving stone. He also committed to journaling. Every night, no matter how tired he was, he wrote down 3 things that went well during the day. Sometimes the list felt insignificant. "I finished my tasks. I had a good meal. I laughed once." But as the pages filled, Daniel realized that gratitude had a way of magnifying even the smallest blessings. He began to see patterns he had ignored before: the supportive colleague who often checked in on him, the neighbor who waved every morning, the fact that he had survived every challenge life had thrown his way. Visualization became another practice. Before bed, he closed his eyes and pictured the life he wanted, a confident version of himself walking with purpose, a home filled with warmth, opportunities opening instead of closing. These mental pictures gave him something to strive for, a direction to point his energy toward. Though reality hadn't caught up yet, his heart felt lighter because he believed it eventually would. Still, the journey was not without obstacles. There were mornings when Daniel woke up with doubts heavier than ever. Days when negative thoughts screamed louder than his affirmations. Times when he felt like all this effort was pointless, like the world was waiting for him to fail again. One particularly tough week, when a project at work collapsed, he almost gave up on the practices entirely. He stared at his journal and thought, what's the use? Positive thinking won't pay my bills or fix my mistakes. But something inside reminded him of how far he had already come. He wasn't the same man who once saw only darkness. He had tools now, habits that gave him strength. And so, instead of abandoning his efforts, Daniel leaned into them even more. He decided to see the failure not as proof of his inadequacy, but as a lesson. What can I learn from this setback? How can this make me stronger? That shift in perspective was powerful. For the first time, he didn't drown in defeat, he grew from it. Gradually, Daniel began to notice changes in how he reacted to life's storms. When colleagues complained endlessly about stress, he found himself searching for solutions instead of joining in. When an unexpected bill arrived, instead of panicking, he calmly budgeted and reminded himself that he had overcome worse before. His resilience was building quietly, like muscles growing stronger with every workout. Then came a pivotal moment. During a meeting, Daniel was given responsibility for leading a small project, something his old self would have immediately doubted. Fear rose within him, but his new mindset reminded him to focus not on failure, but on possibility. He approached the project with confidence, encouraged his teammates, and handled challenges with a calmness that surprised even himself. When the project succeeded, his manager publicly praised him. It wasn't just recognition, it was proof that his new way of thinking was reshaping his reality. Daniel realized that positivity wasn't about pretending problems didn't exist. It was about facing them with courage, patience, and the belief that he had the strength to overcome them. Failures still came, obstacles still appeared, but instead of being walls that trapped him, they became stepping stones that lifted him higher. He was no longer simply surviving, he was growing. Every affirmation, every journal entry, every act of resilience was transforming him from the inside out. For the first time in years, Daniel felt momentum carrying him forward, and deep within, he knew he was preparing for something even greater. The momentum Daniel felt soon began to ripple into the world around him. What had started as small internal shifts began to show up in his external reality. His colleagues noticed his calm presence, the way he offered encouragement rather than criticism, and how he approached challenges with optimism instead of defeat. People who once overlooked him now sought him out for advice. He had become a quiet source of strength, and in turn, opportunities started to open. At work, Daniel was given the chance to lead bigger projects. Each time, the old voice of doubt tried to creep in, but his new mindset was stronger. Instead of telling himself he wasn't good enough, he reminded himself of the progress he had already made, of the times he turned setbacks into lessons. With each success, his confidence grew. The man who once avoided responsibility now embraced it, seeing it as a chance to grow, to serve, and to prove that positive thinking wasn't just theory, it was transformation in action. Beyond his career, Daniel noticed changes in his personal life. His relationships grew deeper because he was no longer consumed by negativity. Friends described him as lighter, more present, more willing to listen. He laughed more freely, and the heaviness that once clouded his days was replaced with a sense of hope. Even in his quiet moments, when he was alone, he found peace instead of emptiness. One of the greatest breakthroughs came when he achieved a longtime dream he once thought impossible. Daniel had always wanted to give a talk, to share something meaningful with others, but his fear of speaking and his belief that no one would care had kept him silent. Now, with his newfound confidence, he accepted an invitation to speak at a small community event. Standing before the audience, his hands trembled at first, but as he shared his story, the struggles, the doubts, and the shift to positive thinking, he felt the room grow still. People nodded, some with tears in their eyes, as if his journey mirrored their own hidden battles. When the applause came, Daniel realized something profound. His transformation was no longer just about him. His story could inspire others to rise too. The impact of positive thinking had extended far beyond his personal success. It had become a force that touched lives around him. He understood now that true change didn't come from pretending life was perfect, but from choosing a perspective that empowered him to face imperfection with courage and grace. As Daniel looked back on his journey, he was almost unrecognizable compared to the man who once wandered hopelessly through that bookstore. The struggles hadn't vanished. Life still presented challenges, but his relationship with them had changed forever. Where he once saw dead ends, he now saw opportunities to grow. Where he once surrendered to despair, he now chose resilience. He began mentoring others who felt trapped in negativity, sharing the same lessons that had saved him. He reminded them that positive thinking was not about ignoring problems but about believing that solutions were possible. It was about gratitude, persistence, and refusing to let fear dictate the future. Daniel often repeated the words that had first sparked his change: change your thoughts and you change your world. He knew now that this was not just a phrase but a truth lived out in every choice he made. And as he watched others take their first steps toward hope, he realized that the greatest gift of his transformation was the ability to light the path for someone else. His journey had come full circle. From darkness to light, from despair to purpose, Daniel had discovered the power of positive thinking, and in doing so, he had changed not just his own life but the lives of those around him. The message was clear, simple, and timeless. While we cannot always control what happens to us, we can always choose how we think, and by changing our thoughts, we hold the power to change our entire world.